New tonight at 10, there are more than 100,000 flock cameras across the country. Privacy concerns and potential misuse of data has now led to some cameras being vandalized and even destroyed. Keokuk, though, has not joined the flock craze. WGEM's Zeke Shapiro spoke with Keokuk's police chief and residents about flock cameras.
Keokuk Police Chief Zeth Baum says it just doesn't make sense for Keokuk to get flock cameras due to the high costs and public sentiment about them.
I mean, essentially cost was the biggest proponent.
That was the initial reason Chief Baum decided not to move forward with flock 18 months ago. Now there are more reasons.
But the more recent discussions have lent towards privacy concerns.
And those discussions haven't been with flock, but instead those who the department serves.
There were concerns from the general public who do feel strongly about their privacy.
Chief Baum says he doesn't disagree with the technology itself, but in a smaller city like Keokuk, where crime may not be as prominent, the cameras wouldn't be feasible nor a popular choice.
You want to police in a fashion that your community respects and appreciates. And that's how law enforcement should be.
In other words, he feels confident his department can get the job done with the resources they have, and residents feel the same.
This area around here, it has been quite effective, and especially when we have attentive officers.
You have some high-profile cases, but chances are, they're going to catch them anyway.
New legislation this month imposed stricter data cycling and misuse guidelines for departments. Chief Baum says as more legislation comes forward, it doesn't make sense for Keokuk to spend their resources on them.
It's really up in the air, and we need to have those definitive lines drawn before you even look at the idea of implementing that technology.
And Baum made sure to emphasize several times that he does not see flock cameras making their way into Keokuk now or really any time in the near future. Reporting in Keokuk, Zeke Shapiro, WGEM News.
And earlier this week, President Trump was asked about the data misuse. He said it's being studied right now and we'll have an answer soon as to our view on it in the coming weeks.